They showed him the door, so he shut it down. In the glittering showroom of Meridian Fine Jewelry store, manager Rebecca Sloane's clipped order, "Sir, I'm calling security," hung in the air like shattered crystal. Under those brilliant chandeliers, the very CEO behind these displays, Elias Vance, straightened his modest hoodie. 12 patrons froze mid-whisper as Sloane's dismissive tone cut through the marble silence. Phones emerged, lenses trained. The air crackled with disbelief. Here was a man whose name adorned the company letterhead, yet he was treated like an intruder in his own domain. In that heartbeat, prejudice pierced opulence, and the world was about to see how swiftly power can pivot. If this strikes a chord, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and comment below. What would you do if a place you own tried to kick you out? Elias Vance paused at the showroom threshold, heart measured behind calm eyes. The Saturday afternoon sun streaming through polished glass, fractured against display cases brimming with diamonds and sapphires. He inhaled, tasting the metallic scent of tension, the cold tang of prejudice undercutting luxury. He had arrived expecting a smooth transaction, a custom Cartier bracelet his daughter's graduation gift ordered and paid in full days ago. Instead, he met suctioned stares and a dismissive manager who refused to see beyond his hoodie. Rebecca Sloane stood behind the counter, arms folded over her immaculate suit as if guarding a fortress of exclusivity. She surveyed Elias with a practiced coolness, as though she could smell his skin and had already decided he did not belong. "Sir, I'm calling security," she announced, her voice clipped. The words crackled like ice shards, each one lodging in the minds of onlookers. A hush fell. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim in response to her arrogance. Elias remained still, expression composed, eyes unwavering. His first reaction was a flash of irony. A man whose corporate signature graced every boardroom memo, whose firm had rescued near-bankrupt companies, was now being judged by the cut of his sleeve. But he did not flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and retrieved his phone, as if prepared to record this insult as fact rather than fiction. His fingers hovered over the screen, but he did not film yet. Phones from purses and pockets flickered to life. A young influencer, Sophia Reyes, positioned her camera discreetly behind a diamond display. Comments scrolled. "Is he serious? That's the CEO. This is disgusting. Get their name." The audience of strangers ripe for indignation gathered virtual momentum. The security guard arrived, an older man in a crisp uniform whose practiced instincts told him this was no ordinary disturbance. He assessed Elias, noting his calm posture, and the live stream reflected in Sloane's wide-eyed realization. "Ma'am?" he asked, Sloane nodding toward Elias. "What's the problem exactly?" Sloane opened her mouth, then closed it, uncertain whether to lean on policy or prejudice. She chose prejudice. "He has no appointment," she said, voice tight. "And frankly, sir, this isn't a browsing lounge." Her words landed like the crack of a judge's gavel. Elias's jaw tightened. Elias slipped his phone back into his pocket and offered a small nod of acknowledgement. "I'm exactly where I need to be," he said. His voice was low but carried across the marble floor, silencing the murmurs. "My daughter's bracelet has been ready for pickup since Tuesday. I called ahead as agreed. You'll find my confirmation in your system." Sloane's assistant manager, Chloe, dipped behind the counter, whispering urgently in Sloane's ear. Sloane's eyes flickered toward the back office. "Check the corporate orders," Chloe finally muttered. "Maybe I missed something." The guard held his stance, an uneasy truce in the air. Above them, the chandelier lights flickered in reflection of the swirling drama. Elias watched Sloane's fingers fly over the register. The guard turned to Elias. "Sir, can you wait over there?" He gestured to a velvet rope. "I'll look into it." Elias took a single step aside, but did not leave the customer area. He pivoted to face the crowd of witnesses. An elderly woman near the emerald cases whispered to her companion, "I've never seen such arrogance." A businessman in a tailored suit shook his head, tapping his temple to record the moment. 5 minutes passed, and then 10. Sophia's live stream had climbed to thousands of viewers. Each comment echoed in the showroom. Boycott. That woman needs fired. He pays her salary. Sloane's face, perfectly made up in neutral tones, flushed with panic. He didn't gloat. He simply continued to wait, poised and dignified. a living contradiction to Sloane's assumptions. This was his domain. He had built it, he sustained it, and he refused to be defined by her ignorance. Finally, Sloane's screen blinked. I can't find your order, she stammered, though her hands betrayed her as they shook. It doesn't show up here. The guard met her gaze. Ma'am, perhaps we need to escalate. His tone lacked judgment. It carried only fact. Elias turned to the guard, voice gentle. Would you call my executive assistant, please? Let's get clarity. He tapped his pocket. Thank you. The guard nodded, retreating behind the counter to place the call. As Sloane collapsed into a profusion of apologies, her mask stripped away. Elias waited, his breathing steady. He surveyed the showroom's lavish trappings, once symbolic of prestige, now hollow shells in the face of real value dignity. The very institution built on exclusivity had failed at its threshold. Moments later, his assistant's voice crackled through the phone. Mr. Vance. I have the confirmation here. C774987, $500 white gold Cartier. Payment cleared, corporate level order. Rebecca Sloane's oversight. He glanced at Sloane, eyes cool. They've also flagged a rebalance of your CSR protocols. You may proceed, and they'll be drafting immediate policy changes. He ended the call, pocketed his phone, and turned to Sloane with a measured nod. The guard stepped aside. Mr. Vance. I apologize, Sloane whispered. Her voice was small in the cavernous space. Elias inclined his head. Thank you. I'll collect the bracelet. He strode past stunned staff and murmuring customers to the display case. Sloane hovered, uncertain whether to assist or shrink away. Chloe reached for the glass and carefully retrieved the bracelet on its velvet pillow, an emblem of the privilege they assumed they could deny. As the bracelet settled into its box, Elias offered a soft smile to the gathering. This will be perfect, he said. His voice carried no triumph, only the quiet satisfaction of justice. In those 10 electric minutes, a legacy had been rewritten. Sloane's dismissal had become policy reform in real time. Phones increasingly lowered, whispers quieted, and the showroom's brilliance returned this time, reflecting respect, not exclusion. Late afternoon light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, fracturing against the polished marble floors of Meridian Fine Jewelry. Each ray caught the edges of diamond necklaces and sapphire rings, sending prisms dancing across display cases. The showroom, usually a cathedral of opulence and hushed reverence, seemed almost to shimmer in anticipation of the weekend's high-end clientele. Elias Vance stepped inside, his footsteps soft but steady. He wore a charcoal hoodie, clean, unassuming, deliberate, paired with tailored slacks and polished leather sneakers. In his hand was nothing more than a sleek phone and a small leather portfolio. No gold watch winked at the chandeliers. No designer briefcase whispered of wealth. His look was intentionally modest, a choice to test the very boundaries of perception that had governed his own business for decades. He paused just inside the entrance, taking in the showroom's panorama. The curved mahogany counter, the velvet-lined ring trays, the discreet security cameras angled toward every display. He inhaled the faint scent of polished wood and leather luxury distilled into an atmosphere. Ahead, 6 customers stared, half in admiration of the glittering wares, half in curiosity at the newcomer who dared to carry himself so casually among them. Rebecca Sloane stood behind the counter, lips pressed in a practiced line. Her designer suit was immaculate, her signature red lipstick a bold slash of color. She tapped an order tablet with a single precise finger, her face framed by the showroom's crystal chandeliers, every movement measured for effect. Elias walked forward with purpose. Hello, he began, voice calm but carrying through the hush. I'm here to pick up my daughter's graduation gift, the custom Cartier tennis bracelet. It's order C7749. Sloane looked up just once and studied him. In that instant, her eyes flicked from the hooded sweatshirt to the portfolio in his hand, lingering on the unadorned leather rather than the man's quiet confidence. Then she leaned back, crossing her arms. Sir, she said crisply, this is a private showroom. You don't belong here. Her words struck the air like flint to steel. A ripple of shock passed through the customers. The couple near the watches froze mid-gesture. The lone shopper by the rings glanced over, and a mother clutching her daughter's hand frowned in disbelief. The showroom's crystalline stillness shattered. Elias's expression remained composed. He unclipped the strap of his portfolio and let it fall to his side. "I believe I do," he replied. His voice was gentle but carried an undercurrent of authority. "I placed this order and prepaid in full last Tuesday. I called your design team on Tuesday at 2:17 p.m. I can show you the call log if needed." Sloane's jaw tightened. She glanced sideways at her assistant manager, Chloe Foster, who hovered just behind her. Chloe's eyes widened, evidence that Elias's claim was not common knowledge. Sloane recovered her practiced cool. "Appointments are required," she countered. "We cannot serve walk-ins for premium collections." Elias nodded slowly. "Understood." He reached into his pocket and produced a first-class boarding pass, LAX to JFK seat 2A. "I'm flying tonight." But more importantly, he added, touching the portfolio, "I own this company. My name is on the letterhead of every corporate memo." Sloane's eyes flicked to the boarding pass, then to the portfolio's embossed corner, a discreet gold Meridian logo. She swallowed her practiced veneer cracking for the first time. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Let me check with my supervisor." As Sloane turned to tap her tablet, Elias glanced around the showroom. The customers' phones were out, screens trained on the scene. The father and daughter by the engagement rings exchanged glances. The lone shopper by the diamond necklaces tapped out a live tweet. Luxury store kicks out its CEO WTF. The showroom's prismatic calm had become a stage for spectacle. Within moments, Sloane's assistant manager appeared from the back office, tablet in hand. She swallowed hard. Sir, Chloe said, voice low, I'm finding the order now. It's flagged as corporate VIP. You're cleared." Sloane cut in, her posture rigid. "Then why wasn't I notified?" she demanded, though her words barely masked panic. "I process all VIP orders personally." Chloe shook her head. "This one went direct to corporate. It bypassed local approval per protocol for high-value corporate clients." Sloane's face paled. The guard, who had been lingering discreetly at the edge of the showroom, spoke up in measured tones. "Ma'am, perhaps a review of the system would help." Sloane swallowed her pride and tapped her tablet. The screen blinked, order C7749 paid in full, ready for pickup. She looked up, lips quivering. "I apologize, Mr. Elias Vance," he supplied, stepping forward. His calm returned like dawn after a storm. "Please retrieve my daughter's bracelet." Sloane nodded, stepping aside as Chloe unlocked the velvet-lined case. Elias watched every movement with cool satisfaction. The assistant manager carefully lifted the Cartier bracelet. 18K white gold flawless diamonds flickering like captured stars, and placed it into a black presentation box. He accepted it without a word, the box barely disturbing his composed posture. He closed it with a soft click. Then without fanfare, he turned and walked toward the exit. As he passed under the crystal chandeliers, the showroom's air shifted, no longer a gilded cage, but a testament to dignity reclaimed. Phones lowered, whispers softened into awed silence. Sloane's clipped apology trailed him. "I am deeply sorry." But Elias did not turn back. His footsteps echoed across the marble as he exited, MBA honed resolve and real-world resolve entwined in every stride. Outside, the valet handed him the keys to his Tesla. He slipped the bracelet into his satchel, shoulders squared. Behind him, the showroom doors closed with a decisive whoosh, sealing a moment that would ripple far beyond these walls. Want to see how the rest of this power play unfolds? Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss a second. Late afternoon light continued to filter through the showroom's grand windows, but its warmth did nothing to thaw the frosty standoff unfolding at the center of Meridian Fine Jewelry. Elias Vance stood alone on the glossy marble floor, the weight of silent scrutiny pressing in from every direction. On the counter before him lay the neatly folded tablet screen, face up, the timestamp and email thread visible even to a cursory glance. Order C7749 confirmed. Cartier tennis bracelet. Pickup. Tuesday, 2:17 p.m. The evidence was indisputable. Yet Rebecca Sloane, the store manager, stared at the screen as though it were a cryptic riddle rather than a customer's proof of purchase. Her gloved fingers tapped nervously at her designer tablet. "I still don't see your appointment," she insisted, voice low, but steel-tipped as though repeating a mantra. We have a strict policy. No appointment, no service. Elias's eyes did not waver. He inhaled deliberately as if drawing strength from the showroom itself. I understand your policies, he replied evenly. I called Tuesday. I spoke with Mark in your design department. I have the call log right here. With smooth precision, he tapped his own phone, swiping to the call history Cartier. Custom order 2:17 p.m. Tuesday. Sloane glanced at the log, her brow furrowing. She muttered into her tablet, There's no record in our local system. Her words dripped with disbelief that Elias's carefully documented evidence could exist outside her immediate view. It was as though his data, his reality, were invisible to her. That was when the first snide remark cut across the tension. Chadwick Vance, a white investment banker whose $200,000 purchase of a diamond brooch the week before was still being gossiped about, leaned back against a display case. He flicked imaginary lint from his cuff. Come on, he drawled loud enough for half the showroom to hear. Who racks up $87,000 in Cartier tennis bracelets without flashing a single logo? His smirk glinted under the chandeliers, a challenge daring Elias to defend himself. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, tasting the metallic tang of indignation. Then he opened them, meeting Chadwick's gaze with unwavering composure. It's for my daughter's graduation, he said simply, voice steady as the heartbeat of a metronome. I pay in cash, checks, wires, whatever your system requires. The money is there. Chadwick snorted and crossed his arms. Sure, he said. Does your daughter even know what Cartier is? Or is this some exercise in corporate one-upmanship? A murmur of agreement rippled through several onlookers. Two customers near the sapphire display exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to discomfort. The shop's hushed grandeur, its walls lined with century-old wood, its counters gleaming like liquid, allowed every whispered word to echo with unwanted clarity. Rebecca Sloane held up a hand. Please, she interjected, though her tone betrayed her panic. I just need to follow procedure. From the back of the showroom, Chloe Foster Sloane's assistant manager emerged, her steps hesitant. She carried a small stack of appointment logs and printed invoices. Rebecca, she began, her voice apologetic. I found the corporate order. It skipped local approval per VIP protocol, but I can't override it myself. She placed the papers on the counter, each page a piece of the puzzle, detailed wire transfers, signed corporate memos, and a direct note from Meridian's CFO confirming the transaction. Sloane glanced at Chloe, then at the printed documents, her lips thinning. The manager's composure cracked. Her posture stiffened as though bracing for impact. She swallowed hard, but she did not back down. Instead, she reached out and swiped the papers into her tablet, ostensibly to store them. I need confirmation from corporate headquarters, she declared, though her trembling voice betrayed the uncertainty beneath her authority. Across the showroom, phones continued to rise like parade banners. Sophia Reyes, the 24-year-old influencer, kept her camera trained on Elias, narrating in a hushed, urgent whisper. They're ignoring every piece of proof. This is blatant bias, you guys. They're profiling him for no reason. Her live view counter ticked upward by the second each new viewer drawn by the spectacle of injustice played out in real time. Elias watched all of this with a calm intensity that seemed almost supernatural. He was the eye in the storm of slights, whispers, and assumptions. To those watching, he appeared unruffled, as though he were part of a carefully choreographed performance, rather than a man confronting systemic prejudice. An elderly woman who had been admiring a string of emerald drop earrings stepped forward, her voice firm but kind. Young man, you have every right to that bracelet. Don't let them shame you out of your own purchase. Her statement carried the weight of decades of having seen too many people of color walked past, judged by the color of their skin rather than the merit of their actions. Rebecca Sloane's cheeks flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it as though the right words eluded her. The spotlight had shifted from Elias's hoodie to her manager's credentials and found them wanting. Before the manager could deflect, Chloe Foster slipped behind the counter, pulling up the corporate order confirmation on Sloane's own tablet. The bright screen flickered to life, order C7749. Cartier tennis bracelet. Paid in full. Release authorized. The glow of the confirmation bathed the manager's face in stark light, revealing the momentary fracture of her confidence. Sloane exhaled through clenched teeth. She looked around at the showroom full of witnesses, at the cameras, at the murmuring customers, at Elias's serene but unwavering form, and finally muttered, I apologize. Let me get your bracelet. Elias nodded once, closing the final chapter on her feeble resistance. The assistant manager retrieved the black presentation box, placing it gently before him. He lifted the lid, the diamonds catching the light like so many frozen stars. For a moment he allowed himself a private smile, but only for a heartbeat. He stood the delicate velvet box in hand and offered one gracious nod to the stunned manager. Then, without a backward glance, he turned and strode toward the exit. The showroom fell silent in his wake, the clatter of dropped phones and whispered apologies echoing against the marble and wood. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber. Elias paused at the doorway, the cool evening air mingling with the tension left behind inside. He slipped the bracelet into his jacket pocket and adjusted his hoodie with the ease of a man who knew he had just reclaimed something far more valuable than a piece of jewelry. Behind him, the showroom doors closed softly, but the moment they sealed contained a promise those who wield prejudice as policy would one day find that dignity once denied could be demanded, and won in the most unexpected of arenas. Late afternoon light glanced off the showroom's gilded fixtures as Elias Vance stood at the center of the storm he had never asked for. His pulse drummed in his ears louder than the hushed whispers that had erupted the moment Rebecca Sloane uttered her dismissal. For a heartbeat, the opulence around him, the crystal chandeliers dripping with refracted rainbows, the velvet-lined display cases showcasing diamonds, yet unsold, felt less like a sanctuary of luxury and more like a gilded cage. Within those walls, he was nothing more than a suspect in a hoodie. In that suspended moment, Elias's mind drifted back to boardrooms half a world away. He saw himself at the head of a polished mahogany table, executives in tailored suits, leaning in as he outlined a billion-dollar acquisition with the precision of a conductor directing a symphony. He recalled the weight of the CEO's placard on his office door, the rush of cameras at press conferences, the hush that fell when he raised a single hand. He remembered nights spent in war zones, airfields strewn with relief supplies, his rapid deploy shelters rising like steel fortresses under his direction, while civilians huddled inside safe from mortar blasts. He had commanded markets, defended the vulnerable built empires of both profit and purpose. And yet here, mere steps from a custom Cartier bracelet, he had been reduced to a caricature, an unkempt customer in a hoodie, confused and out of place. The injustice of it stung hotter than any boardroom snub. It was betrayal by a system he owned. His company was the bank's parent. His holdings dwarfed the store's entire balance sheet, yet Sloane's icy glare declared him persona non grata. Elias inhaled, forcing his racing thoughts to settle. He remembered the day he founded Meridian Fine Jewelry, a modest showroom with 3 employees and a single artisan's bench. He thought of the countless calls he had made persuading investors, smoothing out currency transfers, articulating his vision for a boutique that celebrated artistry and human connection. He had chosen every piece, personally traveled to Paris and Geneva to finalize designs, and poured his reputation into the gleam of every diamond and the clasp of every bracelet. He had done all of it so that a father could gift his daughter a symbol of achievement, just as his father had gifted him an engraved pen on his first day of business. This was more than a personal slight. It was an assault on a legacy. As the showroom's polished floorboards creaked under the shifting stares of half a dozen onlookers, Elias felt the steel of his resolve crystallize. He would not simply stand by while prejudice masqueraded as policy. He would prove beyond any shadow of doubt that dignity was not reserved for the well-heeled or well-dressed. It was a right inherent in every human being. He steadied his breathing. The shallow, rapid breaths of anger and hurt gave way to a measured rhythm. He allowed clarity to edge away the haze of indignation. There was a path forward he knew, one forged by facts and unassailable logic. This was not the moment for raised voices or dramatics. It was a moment for precision strategy and unwavering calm. Elias shifted his weight, planting both feet firmly on the marble floor. He folded and unfolded his hands, centering himself. His hoodie and the casual attire he'd chosen to challenge assumptions now felt like armor. It reminded him that vulnerability could be a weapon when wielded with purpose. He had stripped away the trappings of status precisely to reveal the fragility of status-conscious systems. Today, they had exposed their weakness. He glanced at Rebecca Sloan, whose face flickered with confusion, and for a fleeting instant uncertainty. She mouthed rehearsed defense's policy protocol, no record, but each word rang hollow. He saw, too, the smirk frozen on Chadwick Vance's face, as he leaned against the sapphire counter as though daring Elias to prove himself. Chadwick seemed to believe that wealth conferred invincibility, that a loan shark's sneer could override a CEO's credentials. How wrong he was. Elias reached slowly into his pocket and withdrew the small leather notebook he carried for critical notes. With deliberate slowness, he opened it to a fresh page and wrote, "Document every move. No reaction without record." That silent vow was his anchor. Every word, every gesture, every exchanged glance would be logged. If they wanted theater, he would give them undeniable proof. At that moment, the showroom door chimed as a petite woman emerged from the back office. Chloe Foster Sloane's assistant carried more prints of the corporate order and call logs. She paused in her approach, her eyes flicking between Elias and Sloane. For a brief second, severity gave way to empathy in Chloe's gaze. Perhaps she recognized the patterned dismissal-doubt delay that too many people of color had endured in luxury enclaves. Chloe set the papers before the manager but did not intervene further. Her presence, though, was a quiet reminder that not everyone in Sloane's corner shared her prejudice. Elias watched Chloe withdraw and felt a flicker of hope. Allies existed, sometimes hidden among the timid or the complicit. He would need them in the coming moments as his silent siege advanced. The showroom's HUD-like countdown clock continued its slow descent 9:02-9:01. Each second signaled the approach of a scripted deadline he would set for them. Once the board arrived, once his Protocol 6 allies entered, the walls would close in on bias. Prejudice, always disguised as policy, would be exposed under the glare of corporate scrutiny. He looked out at the half-dozen customers, suit-clad executives, a mother and daughter admiring an emerald necklace, the elderly woman who had already offered her support. They were witnesses, their phones raised like reluctant jury members. One small twist of fate could turn their passive surveillance into active advocacy. Elias permitted himself a small exhale. The inner storm that threatened to ignite anger had been tempered into a quiet blaze of resolve. He was not here to plead. He was here to claim what was rightfully his and to ensure no one else would encounter the same erasure. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Sloane by a few decisive paces. The marble gleamed beneath his feet, mirroring the glint of determination in his eyes. He raised his phone and tapped a quick message, "Phase 1 complete. Proceed to Phase 2 on my mark." Instantly, his phone's screen went dark. He slipped it back into his pocket, the device once again an unassuming object. Yet it was the node of an invisible network, his board members' legal counsel PR team, ready to surge into the showroom at his silent command. "The policy," he said, voice low but clear enough for Sloane to hear, "that you wield to deny my service, please show it to me in writing." All eyes turned to the manager as she rummaged through her tablet, paralyzed by the sudden shift in power. The opulent showroom, once a stage for luxury, had become a crucible where arrogance and bias would be tested and found wanting. And as the seconds ticked by, Elias Vance stood unbowed. His inner storm spent, his outer calm, a herald of the reckoning to come. What began as an insult would end in reform, not with a shout, but with the relentless quiet force of truth. The first crack in the showroom's polished veneer came not with raised voices, but with the soft click of screens lighting up. A cluster of customers near the sapphire display case had pulled out their phones, trained lenses on Elias as he stood unflinching, while Rebecca Sloane's tone wavered. Within seconds, one of them, Sophia Reyes, the TikTok influencer, had begun streaming live. Her whispered commentary hovered above the hush, a ripple that became a wave. "They're treating him like a trespasser in his own store. This is unbelievable." The phone screens multiplied like shards of broken glass, each reflecting Elias's composed profile. The manager's flush of embarrassment and the glint of diamonds that suddenly felt cold to the touch. Laughter was gone. In its place rose a low hum of incredulous whispers. A man beside the ruby showcase tapped his screen, watching 10 pairs of eyes fix on his feed as he quietly added his own astonished yes to the scrolling chat. At the far end, the elderly woman who'd defended Elias earlier nodded in solidarity. "We've been shopping here for decades," she hissed to her companion. "Never seen such disgrace." Her companion, a young lawyer from Beverly Hills, turned phone in hand and began recording Elias's every gesture. "For the record," he murmured, adjusting the angle, "this is exactly why we've needed to call people out." The atmosphere crackled with tension, every polished surface, now a microphone for collective outrage. The showroom's signature perfumed air felt thick, as if the very chandeliers overhead were straining under the weight of unspoken accusations. The hushed classical music piped through hidden speakers stuttered and faded. No longer a soundtrack to luxury, but a distant echo of normalcy, an elegy for a moment gone wrong. Even the security cameras, once unobtrusive sentinels in the corners, now seemed to lean forward, capturing every angle of a spectacle that had metastasized from a private dispute into a public reckoning. Elias sensed the cameras and ignored them, his steady gaze fixed on Sloane. But in the flicker of phone flashes, he could feel the force of thousands of unseen eyes, each a testament to the power of modern accountability. Rebecca Sloane's assistant manager, Chloe Foster, hovered by the glass partition, her face pale. For a moment, the assistant's trembling fingers hovered over the phone. She had fumbled earlier. Phones had been banned behind the counters, but now every rule seemed to melt away. Chloe swallowed and met Elias's eyes briefly, a silent plea flickering in her expression. He offered her a small nod of thanks. He recognized her as an ally trapped in the same gilded cage. A handful of secondary staff sales associates who'd been rearranging bracelets a minute before now clustered in the back, whispering in tight huddles. One young man dabbed the corner of his eye with a handkerchief. Another pressed his lips together as if trying to suppress a vow to never remain silent again. The showroom's original mission to celebrate craftsmanship had been eclipsed by its failure to uphold basic human respect. The murmurs swelled into a rhythmic undercurrent. "This is discrimination. He's the owner. They can't do this." Each iteration, each repetition drove the point home. The clink of a bracelet closing on a wrist sounded like a gavel. A woman by the opal collection murmured, "If that were me," and her companion completed the thought. "I wouldn't have stayed silent." Elias allowed himself one brief heartbeat of satisfaction. This collective murmur was more potent than any argument he could muster. It was the currency of outrage, and it multiplied in an instant. Sloane looked around desperate, as if the showroom walls themselves had turned against her mirrors, reflecting the discomfort of her peers rather than the sparkle of gemstones. Then came the assistant manager's tentative voice, rising just above the murmurs. "Rebecca, the order is here. We found it." In that charged moment, the crowd's drumbeat of indignation crescendoed into a roar of surprise. Phones pivoted again, capturing Chloe's pale face as she held out the printed call logs and corporate email confirmations. For the first time, relief and vindication flickered across Elias's features. But Sloane did not collapse in defeat. She straightened her shoulders as if gathering the last shreds of authority and repeated her demand, proof of funds. At that, the murmurs twisted into something darker, a collective gasp, a shared incredulity that any human being would wield bureaucracy as a bludgeon. The flash of cameras intensified the digital feeds, pinged with notifications, and the like counter on Sophia's live stream leapt into the thousands. Elias pressed a gloved hand against the cool glass of the display case. He could feel the faint vibrations of collective outrage humming through the showroom's skeleton. This was no longer about a bracelet or a purchase. It had become a battleground of dignity. Each tick of the digital countdown atop the crystal chandelier sounded like a summons to power, a reminder that time was running out for Sloane's flimsy defenses. He glanced at his watch, 4:19 p.m. 10 minutes had passed since the first snub. 10 minutes of documented prejudice, of witnessed injustice, of phones transformed into witnesses. In those minutes, the world outside had awakened to the story. Every second had built its own momentum, like a wave gathering foam and force before crashing onto the shore of corporate accountability. At that precise moment, Elias's phone vibrated again. He retrieved it and tapped two quick commands: PR team push live statement. Legal, prepare notice of policy review. The taps echoed in his mind like strikes of a judge's gavel. The crowd sensed a shift. The drumbeat of outrage slowed, coalescing into an expectant hush, as if waiting for the next blow. Through the hush, a new sound emerged, the soft click of heels on polished marble. Heads turned, doors swung open. The showroom's gilded doors, which had once stood as barriers to privilege, now became portals for the very change they resisted. Elias straightened his hoodie, squared his shoulders, and prepared to do what no manager had the authority or the will to do. Because in the next moment, the private spectacle would become a corporate coup prejudice, confronted in real-time, power challenged by quiet resolve, and dignity reclaimed by the man who owned the store itself. And as the first few members of the board appeared in the doorway, phones raised and live streams rolling, the showroom of Meridian Fine Jewelry became not just a place of luxury, but a crucible where justice once denied was finally called to account. Elias Vance stood squarely before Rebecca Sloan, the manager, whose dismissive glare had ignited this entire drama. His breathing remained steady, his posture unflinching, every inch the captain of a billion-dollar enterprise. In one hand he held his phone, its screen illuminated with the muted light of an ongoing conference call. In the other, the smooth leather of his briefcase pressed against his side. Around them, the showroom's opulence, its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and glass-topped cases, felt suddenly oppressive, as if the very luxury was now weaponized against him. He tapped his phone, initiating the next sequence in his quiet arsenal. Legal document, everything he said, his voice low but firm. I want every statement, every timestamp, every detail logged. And PR, prepare to go live in 3 minutes. We'll own this narrative before it owns us. Across the showroom, a ripple ran through the assembled onlookers. Smartphones pivoted, the live stream's view count climbed by hundreds, then thousands. Cameras recorded every nuance, the thin line of Rebecca's trembling lips, the assistants peering from behind display cases, the security guard's steely gaze fixed on Elias, not out of suspicion, but awe. He had demanded documentation protocol drilled into him by years of steering corporate crises, and in that demand lay the seed of his power. Rebecca's face, a mask of forced composure, flickered with uncertainty. She squared her shoulders, attempting to recover control. "Sir," she began, her tone clipped. "Our policy requires an appointment for premium collections. And proof of funds." Elias raised a hand, palm outward. "Policy." He repeated each syllable crisp. "Show me the written policy. Not your recitation, not the hearsay from your assistant, but the actual document signed, dated, official. Otherwise, we'll assume no such policy and proceed accordingly." Behind Rebecca, her assistant manager, Chloe Foster, hovered, wringing her hands. A faint rustle of clothing marked the arrival of legal counsel. A sharp-suited woman with a tablet in hand, her badge gleaming with Meridian Fine Jewelry legal affairs. She slipped to Elias's side, nodding. He offered a curt document everything, and she tapped her tablet, fingers flying as she logged the moment. 6:15 p.m. Client Elias Vance requested policy documentation. Manager Rebecca Sloan. No document produced. All around, the hush intensified. The polished cases and glittering gems were silent spectators to this modern courtroom. The clink of jewelry fell silent. The showroom's signature violin track stuttered and cut, as if in deference to the unfolding confrontation. Rebecca rummaged through her ledger, an oversized black binder embossed with the Meridian logo, but her fingers faltered over the pages. She scowled as though the weight of her position should somehow summon the elusive proof. I'll need a moment," she stammered, voice pitched just above a whisper. Elias inhaled, letting the silence stretch. He scanned the showroom, absorbing every camera angle, the influencer's phone propped against a diamond case, the high-net-worth couple leaning forward. At the far end, the expatriate in the corner, live streaming with a professional rig. Each device was a witness, each viewer a juror. "Please," Elias said, voice calm but layered with steel. "Take all the time you need. But remember, you're not just accountable to me. You're accountable to every person here and everyone watching online." He paused, letting his words sink in. "If there's no written policy, we'll consider this an admission of discriminatory practice, and we'll act accordingly." Rebecca's cheeks flamed. She closed the ledger with a snap that echoed across the showroom like a hammer striking crystal. The customers stirred, leaning in hungry for the next move. Chloe, sensing the tide turning, ventured a small plea. "Sir, perhaps we can verify the order in our system." "The call logs from corporate." "Exactly," Elias replied, his tone sharpening. "Corporate call logs, please bring them up. I've already authorized direct access to the central database." He glanced at his legal counsel, who tapped commands into her tablet. Moments later, Sloane's own computer screen flickered, and the lobby's surveillance feed came to life on a nearby display scrolling code lines that betrayed her earlier omissions. The manager swallowed. The assistant's face went white as she realized that Chloe's whispered confession about corporate-flagged orders bypassing local management had been correct. "Here it is," the legal counsel said quietly. She turned the tablet to Rebecca's view. Order C7749. Created Tuesday at 2:17 p.m. Client name Elias Vance. Payment method: corporate Amex Black Card. Amount $87,500. Rebecca's lips parted, but no words came. The ledger lay forgotten on the counter. Behind her, the security guard unclasped his hands. He had remained neutral, but now the weight of evidence beckoned him to stand with justice rather than prejudice. He cleared his throat softly, glancing at Sophia's live stream with its surging viewer count, then back at Elias. "Ma'am," the guard said, voice steady but unnervingly calm. "It appears the order is valid. Shall I assist Mr. Vance with his purchase?" At that, the showroom's energy shifted. The whispers soared into an exclamation of disbelief and triumph. "He's the owner. She's wrong. They can't do this." Elias allowed himself a brief, satisfied nod, but it faded quickly into focus. There was still work to do. The policy that had failed him needed replacing. He turned to the assemblage of cameras and phones and spoke for all to hear. "This won't stand. Not for me, not for any of you. We'll correct this now, right here, right now." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a slim black folder stamped with the Meridian logo and the words, "Executive Authority." With deliberate flourish, he opened it to reveal a notarized board resolution. Effective immediately, all store-level managers must adhere to the central corporate protocol for customer validation. Any local policy restricting premium collection access without documented cause is null and void. Discrimination of any form will result in immediate termination. The folder's sheen glinted under the showroom lights, a visual gavel delivering the verdict. Rebecca took a step back, tears brimming in her eyes as the crowd broke into murmured applause. "Mr. Vance," the security guard said, offering a hand to Rebecca. "Shall I escort her to HR?" Elias shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "We're doing this publicly." "Rebecca Sloane, your employment is terminated for failure to follow corporate policy and for discriminatory conduct, effective immediately." Phones erupted with the news. Sophia let out a whoop on her live stream. The elderly regular clapped a single satisfied hand. Even the financier in the corner lowered his camera in respect. Rebecca's assistant manager, Chloe, exhaled in relief as Elias turned to her. "Chloe," he said gently, "you did the right thing. I've arranged for you to be reassigned to our new equity training team with a promotion and bonus. We'll need your voice in this process." Chloe blinked, tears of relief shining. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," she whispered. "Thank you." Elias turned back to the showroom floor, his gaze sweeping over the witnesses, staff, clients, security, and the distant portals of social live streams. "Let this be the last time anyone demands proof of my worth," he said softly. "From today forward, this store and every store in our network will serve every customer with dignity, without question, without prejudice." A hush settled as the weight of his words sank in. Then one by one the applause rose, not polite or perfunctory, but fierce and genuine, a chorus of affirmation that justice once demanded could indeed be delivered in real time. And as the cameras continued to roll, capturing that moment when prejudice was finally confronted and dismantled, Elias Vance prepared to reclaim his daughter's bracelet, and in doing so reclaim the dignity of every customer who had ever been told they did not belong. The showroom's atmosphere shifted as the fifth minute ticked past. A soft chime from Sophia Reyes' phone went unnoticed by most, but to Elias Vance it was the signal that his quiet escalation was working. Sophia, TikTok influencer turned citizen journalist, had begun live streaming the entire encounter mere moments after Rebecca Sloan's initial dismissal. Her viewer count, which had started in the dozens, now exploded into the thousands, each new viewer a potential witness, a juror in the court of public opinion. Elias watched Sloan's phone buzz insistently across the showroom floor, an insistent staccato reminder that corporate lifelines existed far beyond the gilded display cases. Sloan's assistant manager, Chloe Foster, hovered uneasily behind her brow damp with sweat as she discreetly tried to close down the live stream on Sophia's device, only to see the red live indicator pulse defiantly on the screen. Customers clustered at the periphery, their eyes darting from the glittering jewelry to their own phones' faces illuminated by the glow of social media commentary. In one fluid motion, Elias tapped his earpiece. "Legal," he said, voice low but carrying across the tense hush, start compiling a request for an emergency board convening. And PR Prime our channels. We'll need to push a statement in 5 minutes. Each word landed like a carefully placed stone in a dam, shifting the tide of the confrontation toward the inevitable release corporate intervention. Sophia, her tone hushed but urgent, panned her camera across the showroom. "Live from Meridian Fine Jewelry in Beverly Hills," she whispered to her growing audience. "Watch this. The CEO, yes, the CEO of Meridian, is being told to leave by his own store manager." Her voice crackled with indignation as she zoomed in on Rebecca's white-knuckled grip of the counter edge. Comments cascaded up the screen. "Unreal. How dare they? I'm sharing this everywhere." The digital storm swirled around the physical one, unfolding within the crystal and marble walls. Sloan cleared her throat, attempting to reclaim control. Her voice cracked as she barked into her phone. "Yes, Mr. Garrett? I need an immediate override authority. I'm dealing with a suspicious individual who refuses to leave and is broadcasting live." She thrust the phone toward her assistant in a panicked gesture as though distance would muffle the growing outrage. But the broadcast only burgeoned. From the adjacent cafe, reporters with press badges and DSLRs pivoted in their seats, their coffee cups forgotten as they tracked the drama in real time. One cameraman, TV network emblazoned on his jacket, lifted a professional rig to the open wall's large glass pane, capturing both the exterior shot and the interior quandary. A second reporter dialed her editor, promising live pack a story that would break the morning cycle wide open. Elias, noting the mobilization of cameras and keystrokes, allowed a wry half-smile. He straightened, smoothing the crease of his hoodie. "Thank you," he murmured into his earpiece, "but we'll handle this in-house." Then, raising his voice just enough to ripple through the showroom's hushed audience, he addressed Sloan directly. "Rebecca, your call log shows our pre-order was confirmed at 2:17 p.m. Tuesday. Your own assistant verified it seconds ago. You've chosen to ignore protocol, now you're making this a corporate issue." He paused, letting his calm authority counterbalance Sloan's flustered panic. "If regional oversight is needed," he continued, "I'll bring the entire board to this lounge myself." At those words, the hush deepened. The polished cases and chandeliers bore solemn witness to his promise. In minutes, the highest levels of Meridian Fine Jewelry would arrive, summoned directly by their CEO. Chloe nudged Sloan, whispering urgently. Sloan's crisp suit, once a symbol of her self-assured command, now felt like an ill-fitting armor. She pressed the call button on her phone again, sweat dotting her temples. "Mr. Garrett, please, I need your directive." But on the showroom monitors, Sophia's live stream commentary had already shifted tone. "He's in charge. The tweet storm is already underway. Hashtag Meridian CEO eyes me." Elias listened to the soft click of incoming messages on his own device. A direct text from Diana Croft, Senior VP of Operations, read, "Standing by. How can I assist?" He gave a slight nod, though she could not see it. "Pull up security footage," he whispered. Timestamp 4:11 to 4:16 p.m. "We need a record of every moment." His legal counsel, standing discreetly behind him, tapped her tablet, confirming that the surveillance logs were in motion. Outside the showroom's diamond-paned windows, passers-by slowed in their tracks, nose pressed against the glass, catching snippets of the spectacle. A line formed not for coffee or pastries, but for the show of a lifetime. A CEO confronting prejudice in real time. The energy crackled as though the chandeliers themselves hummed in sympathetic resonance. In the back office, muted conversations erupted. Sloane's supervisor, who had only moments earlier been oblivious to the encounter, now hovered at the doorway, eyes wide as a call came in from corporate headquarters. "Yes," he muttered, glancing at his watch. "I'm on my way." He snapped off the phone, panic and regret etched into his features. Elias, sensing the momentum had shifted irrevocably, turned to address the showroom's clientele, his voice strong but measured. "I apologize for the disruption," he said, "but today's events are proof that we must do better right now in this very space. We'll revise our protocols immediately." A ripple of empowerment passed through the crowd. The promise of swift, systemic change emanated from his composed stance like a beacon. Sophia, sensing the climax building, wrapped her live stream with a flourish. "Folks, you're witnessing the turning point. In 5 minutes, the CEO has called in the board, and prejudice is about to meet policy. Stay with me for every stunning moment." The high net worth patrons, once leaning back in indifference, now leaned forward, phones out, capturing every gesture. A middle-aged couple near the sapphire display whispered to each other, "We'll shop here again if they do this for every customer." In that charged air, Sloane finally lowered her phone, realizing that no amount of regional override could undo the avalanche of public scrutiny. She exhaled, her authority crumbling as she met Elias's unwavering gaze. The power imbalance had been exposed, laid bare by his unruffled composure and the digital audience's relentless gaze. Elias smiled quietly, triumphant, yet tempered by the gravity of the moment. He turned his head slightly, acknowledging the arrival of his general counsel and PR director at the showroom entrance. Their presence sealed the turning point. What began as a humiliating snub had become a summons for justice, and in mere minutes, prejudice housed in marble and crystal would be met with accountability from the highest corporate tier. As the 5th minute gave way to the 6th, the gears of change clicked into motion. The next act, a boardroom overture within the showroom's very walls, was poised to unfold. And under the glittering chandeliers of Meridian Fine Jewelry, one truth shone as brightly as the diamonds when dignity is denied. Measured resolve can reclaim it and reshape an entire institution in the span of a single powerful moment. Within minutes, the clatter of high heels and the soft thud of polished loafers echoed through the showroom's marble expanse. Elias Vance, standing by the Cartier display, felt a subtle shift in the air as 2 sharply dressed figures navigated the crystal chandelier glare toward him. To his left, his general counsel, Meredith Cho, moved with practiced calm, her tablet open and ready. To his right, Addison Reyes, PR director for Meridian Fine Jewelry, intercepted the cluster of reporters pressing their cameras against the glass. Behind them, 2 corporate security leads, stern-faced veterans of loss prevention and executive protection, took up positions by the entrance, their earpieces twitching with incoming directives. Rebecca, Sloane's store manager, glanced up from her frantic keypad tapping and froze. The sleek tablet in her hand, once a symbol of her local authority, now bore a video call from Alan Garrett, the district supervisor. His visage flickered on the screen, a crisp swivel chair behind him serving as his backdrop. Garrett's lined face, part shock, part reprimand, filled the tablet frame as he cleared his throat. "Rebecca," he began, voice taut, "I need a full report, right now." The demonstration of corporate escalation unfolded like a scene in slow motion. Sophia Reyes, her phone perched atop a display stand, panned the live stream feed to capture Meredith Cho's entry. "Legal has arrived," she whispered. Voice hushed, but fired with excitement. Comments leapt onto her screen. "This is boardroom realness. They're bringing in the heavy hitters," the viewer count inching upward by the second. Elias stepped forward, his leather notebook clasped in one hand, and a measured smile settling onto his face. He addressed Sloane without rank or voice, even but firm. "Meredith and Addison are here to ensure corporate policy is followed and that every customer, including me, is treated with respect." He nodded toward the security leads, who straightened outer collars crisp. "And those gentlemen," he added, "are here to facilitate a safe, transparent resolution." Sloane's eyes darted from the tablet where Garrett's fingers tapped impatiently against his desk to the growing crowd of well-heeled customers, journalists, and the security duo. She appeared suspended between defiance and compliance, her carefully maintained composure cracking beneath the weight of full corporate scrutiny. Rebecca Meredith Cho's voice cut through the hush steady and precise. "We've reviewed the initial transcripts of this incident. I'd like you to walk us through your decision-making process." Cho's calm competence radiated authority. Even Sloane's assistant manager, Chloe Foster, exchanged a glance of both relief and apprehension with her manager. Addison Reyes stepped forward smoothly, blocking the nearest camera lens. She raised a hand, palm outward, projecting warmth. "We appreciate everyone's patience. We'll be issuing a statement shortly to clarify Meridian's position and outline the steps we're taking. For now, please allow us to gather the facts in a private setting." Her tone balanced diplomacy with steel, an unspoken promise that PR would guide the narrative. Across the showroom, Sophia's live feed caught every moment: Garrett's tablet screen, Meredith's clipboard, Addison's poised intervention. The comments exploded: CEO calls in council, epic PR team. On deck must be huge. The virtual audience became a silent jury, their collective gaze magnifying the gravity of the standoff. Elias turned back to Sloane. "The log shows I called ahead, the order was prepaid, and the inventory confirms my daughter's bracelet is here." His voice remained unhurried, each syllable a polished gem. "Now, under corporate directive, I request that you and your assistant hand over all records related to my order and this incident." Sloane swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have anything else." She pressed the tablet to her chest as if it were her shield. At her side, Chloe hovered, brow furrowed, ready to interject, but Meredith Cho's glance silenced her. Cho's lips curved into a slight ironclad smile. "Then we'll retrieve them," she said, nodding to the security leads, and review every log, every call record. "We'll complete our audit within the hour." As the security leads moved to Sloane's workstation, gently but firmly requesting access to her terminal and printed logs, the showroom's bustle dimmed into a respectful hush. The cluster of high-value clientele once focused on velvet-lined display cases now watched the weight of corporate scrutiny settling over them like a press release in motion. Some tapped their phones, sending brief messages to colleagues. Witnessed history at Meridian boards about to fry a manager. Garrett's tablet crackled, and his voice, now laced with authority, resonated through Sloane's own device. "Rebecca," he said, "I'm elevating this matter to the regional office. Prepare for a full internal review. Effective immediately. You're to stand down and cooperate fully." His directive reverberated through the showroom, banishing any illusion of local autonomy Sloane had believed she wielded. A soft click marked the end of Garrett's video feed. Sloane lowered the tablet, her shoulders slumping as the reality sank in. Her moment of prejudice, once enacted behind the crystal chandeliers, was now a board-level affair. Addison Reyes raised her hand again, signaling the press to hold questions until after the official statement, an act that reclaimed order from chaos. Elias watched Sloane's transformation with measured empathy. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for acknowledging the process. My daughter's gift means the world to me." He turned slightly, catching the eye of Marcus James, the security lead who had first intervened to prevent physical ejection. Marcus gave a respectful nod, a silent salute to dignity upheld. As the legal team and security worked behind Sloane's counter, Meredith Cho leaned in to confer with Addison. Their whispered conversation blended corporate strategy with empathy, ensuring the narrative remained clear. Meridian stood against prejudice, its highest authority championing equitable treatment. In that charged atmosphere, the showroom's original purpose to showcase opulent jewelry felt supplanted by its new function, a crucible where systemic bias would be examined and extinguished. A hush enveloped the space, broken only by the soft tapping of Meredith's keyboard and the distant clink of a security lead accessing Sloane's logs. Customers, sensing the gravity of corporate accountability, began to murmur in low tones of approval. A middle-aged woman near the diamonds gently placed a hand on her husband's arm and whispered, "This is the Meridian I trust." A younger couple by the engagement ring smiled, their eyes bright with renewed confidence. Even the once scoffing investment banker who had knocked aside Elias's tablet now watched silently, his earlier bravado subdued by the full weight of corporate presence. Seconds stretched into moments of collective reflection. Under the bright showroom lights, the shimmering gems glimmered with newfound purpose. symbols not only of luxury but of dignity affirmed. The city beyond the showroom's windows pulsed with life traffic, humming, pedestrians streaming by, but within these walls justice was unfolding in real time. As the 10th minute approached, Elias closed his leather notebook, tapping it shut with finality. He rose from his place by the display case and approached his counsel. "Thank you all," he said, voice carrying across the hushed room. "Let's ensure our policies reflect the respect every customer deserves." Meredith inclined her head. "Absolutely," she replied. Addison added, "And we'll get that statement drafted highlighting our immediate steps." Their Unity Legal PR security and CEO stood as a testament when prejudice surfaced, measured resolve, and collective action could transform outrage into reform. The showroom's crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, their brilliance undimmed. Yet now their light illuminated more than gemstones. It shone on a moment when bias met its match, when corporate allies stepped in to right a wrong in real time. And for every witness, those present behind the glass walls and the thousands watching through live streams, the truth resonated: injustice could not stand when power and principle converged in purpose. Elias's gaze never wavered as he lifted his phone, the showroom's shimmer refracting against the Cartier cases behind him. In one fluid motion, he navigated through contacts until the call connected to Diana Croft, Senior Vice President of Operations for Meridian Fine Jewelry. A ripple ran through the showroom. Store manager Sloane's confident composure buckled, and the half-dozen patrons who'd clustered around, phones in hand, stiffened at the weight of corporate acknowledgement. "Sir, this is Diana Croft," the voice answered, crisp and measured, crackling just slightly over Sloane's tablet speaker. The showroom's ambient murmur fell still, as if the chandeliers themselves leaned in to eavesdrop. "I understand there's been an incident at our Beverly Hills location. I want to apologize personally for any distress caused." Her apology, though delayed, carried an authority that left no room for local defiance. Elias inclined his head, his hoodie's hood resting casually on his shoulders, the contrast between his relaxed attire and corporate command stark against the showroom's opulence. "Thank you, Diana. I'd like to request an immediate policy review," he said, voice calm but unwavering. He allowed a moment for her to absorb the request, for the showroom's silent audience to lean forward in anticipation. "I'm of course," Diana stammered, the hum of her office faint behind her words. "Please tell me what you require, and I'll mobilize the team right away." Elias's lips curved into a small, incisive smile. First he began, "I need confirmation that Rebecca Sloane will be relieved of her duties at this location pending a full investigation into her conduct. Second, I want the entire customer service protocol at this store and all others placed under immediate review for potential bias. Third, I expect a clear public statement from Meridian leadership acknowledging the incident and outlining our steps to prevent any repetition." He paused, letting each demand register in the sudden hush that had settled like a curtain before a stage. Sloane's face, pale as the cashmere sweater she once presumed contemptuously casual, betrayed her panic. She glanced toward Chloe Foster, her assistant, who in turn pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Yes," Diana croaked, voice tight. "I will draft the necessary memos today. Rebecca Sloane will be suspended pending the outcome of the inquiry, and I will personally oversee the protocol audit. A public statement will be released within the hour." Elias gave a single measured nod. "Thank you, Diana. I trust you understand the urgency." He snapped his phone closed, the screen going dark, and tucked it back into his pocket. At that signal, the security leads moved forward, their presence once a backdrop, now an active force guiding the sequence of events. One approached Sloane gently, guiding her aside. "Please gather your personal effects," he said quietly. "Corporate will arrange your transition out of the role." Sloane's protests, half-formed and strangled in her throat, died in the face of the security lead's unyielding calm. Elias turned to the showroom, sweeping his gaze across the customers, whose dismay had transmuted into solidarity. An elderly woman near the sapphire display caught his eye and offered a nod of respect. Two women by the engagement rings lowered their cameras, their expressions softened with relief. Even the white investment banker, who earlier had knocked Elias's tablet aside in a contemptuous flourish, now stood rooted, a hint of shame flickering across his face as he pocketed his phone. Meredith Cho, General Counsel, stepped forward and placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, a gesture of both solidarity and support. "We have corporate in motion," she said, voice low enough to be heard only by him. "Legal and HR are drafting the necessary documents now." Addison Reyes, PR director, took the moment to address the wider audience. Stepping in front of the Cartier showcase, she raised both hands palm out, as if conducting an orchestra of attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, voice rich yet warm, "thank you for your patience. Meridian Fine Jewelry recognizes the seriousness of today's events. We will issue a comprehensive statement in 30 minutes, and in the meantime, store operations will be paused so our team can implement immediate training adjustments." A ripple of murmurs of approval coursed through the showroom. Sophia Reyes, the influencer whose live stream had ignited the spectacle, lowered her phone with a satisfied smile, the viewer count still climbing rapidly. "Now that's how you handle bias," she murmured to her camera. Comments scrolled, corporate, finally doing right. "That's a CEO who means business. Sloan out in 10 minutes. Epic." Elias watched the small triumphs unfold, the manager's retreat, the silent apologies of onlookers, the headlines in the making. He understood that the real turning point had been this corporate intervention, the moment when local prejudice collided with executive accountability and lost. Wearing no visible sign of his power besides the calm certainty in his posture, he stepped closer to the center of the showroom. "Thank you all," he said, voice carrying across the polished floors and under the glittering chandeliers. "Your presence here and your willingness to stand by what's right has made this possible." He allowed his words to hang in affirmation, not just of his own dignity regained, but of the collective commitment required to uproot bias. As the store manager was escorted toward the back office, security leads ushered customers back to the display cases, ensuring the transition remained professional. Chloe Foster, assistant manager, stood off to the side, her eyes wet but her stance open. Elias stepped to her and offered a quiet nod of encouragement. She managed a dashed smile before returning to assist him with retrieving the custom bracelet. Meanwhile, Addison Reyes conferred with her PR team, already dictating bullet points. Meridian stands for dignity and respect. Immediate suspension of implicated staff, new mandatory bias training, public apology from senior leadership. The newsroom notifications pinged on her tablet as the story broke across social feeds. Meredith Cho dialed her phone, her fingers flying over the touchscreen as she coordinated with the legal department. "We have written confirmation from Diana Croft on record," she said into the line. "Proceed with drafting the notice of suspension and protocol revision. Ensure it's ready to go live in under 30 minutes. Elias watched the choreography of corporate machinery in motion with a sense of completeness. The custom bracelet, a symbol of a father's love and a daughter's achievement, had become far more than a gift. It was the catalyst for systemic change, the moment when a man's right to exist as both CEO and customer pierced a wall of prejudice and cracked it wide open. The final echoes of the confrontation faded into the showroom's restored calm, the subdued footsteps of security, the soft click of high heels as Sloane's desk was cleared, and the distant hum of reporters dialing in for official statements. The display cases once again reflected only the glitter of gemstones, but now each stone seemed to sparkle with renewed purpose. In that cinematic tableau, Elias, in casual hoodie, flanked by counsel and PR corporate leadership on screen, and a showroom transformed into a theater of accountability, the true climax had unfolded. Not in violence or rancor, but in the authoritative affirmation that injustice, however polished or protocol-bound, cannot stand when power harnesses principle in real time. For the customers who had witnessed it, this store was no longer just a luxury boutique. It was a testament to the potency of principled leadership, a visceral reminder that bias faced with decisive resolve and collective action can be dismantled within minutes, and that dignity once asserted becomes the foundation for lasting reform. As the dust of confrontation settled, the Meridian showroom, once a gilded stage for prejudice, transformed into the antechamber of accountability. Mere minutes after Senior VP Diana Croft's orders crackled to life on Rebecca Sloane's trembling tablet, the verdict was both swift and irrevocable. In under 10 minutes, Sloane had been summoned to a private alcove behind a velvet curtain. There, flanked by stern-faced HR representatives and corporate security leads, she was informed that her tenure as store manager was terminated effective immediately for conduct unbecoming and discriminatory behavior. The word discrimination had not been uttered lightly. It was grounded in documented evidence, the live stream footage from Sophia Reyes' TikTok that bore witness to Sloane's dismissal order. Chloe Foster's admission that key customer records had been ignored, and Elias Vance's calm but pointed recitation of call logs and email confirmations. Diana Croft herself appeared on a second tablet screen, her expression grave. "Rebecca," she said, voice low but firm, "we have zero tolerance for bias. Your actions have violated Meridian's core values. You are relieved of your duties." Sloane's protest, stifled by corporate finality, trailed off into a stunned silence. Back on the showroom floor, the announcement rippled through the gathered clientele and staff like a seismic wave. Phones still recording customers exchanged looks of astonished approval. The white investment banker who'd mocked Mr. Vance tucked his phone away, shame flushing his cheeks. Nicholas Hayes. The security lead approached Elias with the Concordance of Resolution, a printed memorandum bearing the Meridian logo at its header, signed by Diana Croft herself. Immediate implementation of Dignity First Protocol, effective immediately. Meridian Fine Jewelry commits to 1. Timely greeting. Every customer shall be acknowledged by staff within 30 seconds of entering any store. 2. Zero profiling. No customer shall be subject to differential treatment based on appearance, attire, or perceived affluence. 3. Transparent escalation. Any complaint alleging bias or improper conduct must be escalated directly to district management with documented follow-up provided to the complainant within 48 hours. Hayes held the parchment aloft, and in that moment, the showroom's chandeliers seemed to gleam not merely with crystal, but with renewed purpose. Elias stepped forward to receive the memorandum, his casual hoodie replaced in significance by the weight of the document. He ran a single finger down the printed bullet points, then met the eyes of each person in the room, customers, sales associates, and silent witnesses alike. "This," he said, "voice clear is the standard by which we will measure ourselves going forward. No exceptions." Addison Reyes, Meridian's PR director, moved among the display cases, dictating into her phone draft press release. Meridian launches Dignity First protocol setting new industry benchmark for inclusive luxury retail. Her thumbs flew across the touchscreen even as she nodded at Elias to affirm the choreography of corporate repair. Chloe Foster, still trembling from her role in rescuing the custom Cartier order, approached Elias with the velvet box in hand. "Mr. Vance," she said, voice quavering with relief, "your daughter's bracelet. The tennis bracelet." 18K white gold flecked with diamonds glimmered like a promise. Elias accepted it, gave Chloe a reassuring nod, and allowed the moment's warmth to calm the showroom's residual tension. Nearby, a small cluster of customers, among them the elderly patron who'd earlier protested Sloane's treatment, began quietly applauding. Technical staff reset the store's background music, replacing the taunting jazz with something softer, more hopeful, a gentle piano piece that seemed to honor both dignity regained and futures restored. Meredith Cho, the general counsel, stepped up beside Addison. "We're also establishing an anonymous reporting hotline staffed 24/7 by trained diversity officers," she announced. "And a biannual audit of all client interactions will be conducted to ensure compliance." The audience murmured approval. Guests who'd once been spectators now felt part of a movement toward respect. Elias turned to Nicholas Hayes. "Security protocols?" he asked. Hayes cleared his throat, his professionalism tempered by visible pride. "We'll reinforce regular bias awareness briefings for all staff," Hayes replied. "And any member of our security team who witnesses or is informed of profiling must report it immediately. Failure to do so will result in disciplinary action." By now, the banks of display cases had resumed their intended function, showcasing the sparkling artistry of fine jewelry, but the air between them had shifted. What had been a site of exclusion had become the very crucible in which inclusive retail values were forged. The privately drafted Dignity First memorandum, originally intended as an internal corrective measure, was quietly placed beneath the glass atop the reception desk, visible to anyone who sought proof of Meridian's transformed ethos. As the last echoes of corporate machinery hummed into place, Elias finally addressed the room's denouement. With a small, wry smile, he said, "I came here expecting to retrieve a gift. Instead, I witnessed a transformation. Thank you to every witness for recording, for speaking up, and for reminding us that respect is not a privilege but a birthright." His words settled over the crowd like a benediction. Phones lowered, applause rose, and even the security cameras blinked as though acknowledging their role in recording this watershed moment. In under 10 minutes, a single act of discrimination had triggered the swift removal of a manager, the drafting of a new policy on the showroom floor, and the reaffirmation of human dignity at the heart of luxury retail. Elias pocketed the velvet box, purchased not just the bracelet, but a renewed faith in systemic reform. The showroom doors opened for him, and as he passed through, the final click of his casual shoes on the polished marble echoed with the promise that no one owner or customer would ever walk these aisles again feeling unwelcome or unseen. That afternoon, Meridian Fine Jewelry did more than change a policy. It lit the way for an industry. And for every customer who walked through those doors thereafter, the engraved words of the Dignity First protocol would stand as a lasting testament. Respect once denied now demands unwavering protection. Late that evening, as Los Angeles traffic hummed beyond the showroom windows, Meridian Fine Jewelry's Beverly Hills location glowed with a different kind of brilliance. Outside news vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, and camera crews bustling with last-minute preparations. Inside the store was a hive of purposeful energy rather than stifled tension. Sales associates gathered in the open client lounge, eyes glued to glowing smartphones and tablet screens, watching as social feeds erupted with the hashtag #DignityFirst. In conference rooms upstairs, corporate teams pored over real-time dashboards. The live stream of Elias Vance's confrontation had amassed millions of views, and within hours, Meridian's stock price ticked upward in after-hours trading. By midnight, the numbers were in, and they were nothing short of astonishing. Month-over-month revenue at the Beverly Hills flagship had surged 34%, fueled by an influx of customers drawn not only by the store's legendary gems, but by the story of how justice had been served in its own halls. Patrons who had once hesitated at the threshold of luxury retail now streamed in, eager to witness the space that had become emblematic of inclusive service. Even the store's Christmas ornament display, once merely decorative, now bore a small Dignity First certified emblem, a quiet marker of the policy born that afternoon. But the transformation ran deeper than a single location's financial rebound. The following morning, every Meridian Fine Jewelry employee across the country received an urgent email with the subject line, "Dignity First, training mandatory for all staff." By 9:00 a.m. in break rooms and back offices from New York to Miami, employees logged into virtual training modules led by Dr. Imani Jordan, the renowned diversity consultant from UCLA. Her opening lecture, streamed live to 847 retail locations, highlighted real footage from the Beverly Hills incident, illustrating how unconscious bias could infect every customer interaction. Behind each example, a voiceover reminded staff, "Every person you greet is a guest first, never a suspicion." At the Beverly Hills store itself, the newly appointed interim manager Mateo Diaz convened a morning huddle on the showroom floor. He brightened the room's reclaimed wood service desk with coffee and pastries from a local minority-owned bakery, one of the first beneficiaries of Meridian's new supplier diversity initiative. As cherry-red velvet ropes were retracted and display cabinets polished to perfection, Mateo addressed the team. "Yesterday we learned our policy wasn't enough. Today, we exemplify what it means to welcome every customer with respect. Let's make sure this store and every store lives up to the promise of Dignity First." Down the hall, human resources teams finalized the severance details for Rebecca Sloan and her assistant manager Brittany Foster. Their terminations were swift, but Meridian's leadership stressed a broader mission. Managers and staff who had been complicit in ignoring prior bias complaints would undergo one-on-one coaching or where necessary face further disciplinary action. To ensure transparency, the company published an online dashboard accessible to both employees and customers, tracking the status of discrimination complaints and the progress of bias training modules. Meanwhile, the Snapchat and Instagram stories kept coming. Sophia Reyes, the 24-year-old influencer whose TikTok first cast light on the injustice, polled her followers on which Meridian store they planned to visit. In response, over 10,000 messages poured in within the hour, many from patrons pledging to shop exclusively at stores committed to the Dignity First protocol. The spontaneous groundswell of support prompted Meridian's marketing director, Kevin Lowe, to draft a new campaign, a series of short films titled Welcome Here, featuring real guests of every background sharing moments of genuine connection with store staff. Industry observers took notice. The National Retail Federation ran an analysis estimating that inclusive service frameworks could boost customer retention by up to 25% in the luxury sector. Competitors, initially wary, began quietly auditing their own policies. By the end of the week, 3 major jewelry chains had announced partnerships with external diversity firms, citing Meridian's example as a benchmark for the future of luxury retail. A headline in Retail Today declared, "From humiliation to revolution, how one viral moment rewrote the rules of high-end service." At corporate headquarters, Elias Vance convened a strategy session with his executive leadership team. On the big screen, a live map pulsed with ink blots of social media mentions and terminology analysis. Equity, respect, and dignity dominated the conversation. Diana Croft, the SVP of Operations, reported on the first wave of bias audits across the chain, flagging branches that required additional support. Carlos Paya, the CFO, detailed the revenue uptick and projected that, with sustained momentum, Q2 earnings could exceed projections by as much as 18%. Yet, in Elias's eyes, the financials were secondary. Our success, he reminded them, is measured by how many customers feel truly seen. 6 weeks later, the ripple effects were clear. Customer satisfaction scores across Meridian's 847 stores had climbed to an all-time high of 94%, up from 77% the previous quarter. Mystery shoppers, now including diverse community volunteers, reported consistent bias-free interactions. Employee surveys showed a 400% increase in confidence to report discrimination, while anonymous feedback channels revealed a culture increasingly attuned to inclusion. In the Beverly Hills store that had lived through the crisis, clients now lingered not just to admire sapphires, but to feel part of something larger. A plaque near the entrance emblazoned with the words, "Dignity First Institute founded, April 15, 2024. stood as a testament to the day a single act of prejudice yielded to systemic reform. Families, business patrons, and curious tourists alike read the inscription, paused, and smiled. Here was a place where luxury meant more than price, it meant dignity for all. And back in the heart of campus at Meridian's Los Angeles headquarters, a small group gathered to celebrate another milestone, the official launch of the Dignity First Council, a permanent advisory body composed of frontline staff, diversity experts, and guest representatives. Their charter was simple: to ensure that Meridian's values evolved alongside its customers' needs, that every new policy stemmed from lived experience, and that no customer, regardless of attire, background, or walking history, would ever feel as if they didn't belong. In boardrooms and back offices and policy documents and product training, the story of Elias Vance's quiet power and of a manager fired just 10 minutes after her own prejudice was laid bare had become the lodestar for a new standard in luxury service. And as evening fell once more on the Beverly Hills Boulevard, the showroom's windows reflected the neon glow of a city in motion, undaunted, inclusive, and irrevocably changed by a single moment of reckoning. Weeks later, the ripple of change that began in Meridian's Beverly Hills showroom had become a tidal wave reshaping the luxury retail landscape. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass rotunda of Stanford's law school graduation ceremony, painting kaleidoscopic patterns on caps and gowns. Among the sea of black fabric and gold tassels, one detail shone with particular brilliance: the delicate Cartier tennis bracelet clasped lightly on Eva Vance's wrist. To any observer, it could have been just another graduation gift from a proud father. Yet for those who knew its backstory, it symbolized something far greater: a triumph of dignity over dismissal of systemic reform born from a single act of bias confronted and reversed. Ava's tassel fluttered as she rose to accept her diploma, her eyes sweeping across the crowd until they found her father. Elias Vance stood at the edge of the aisle, unassuming in a dark suit, yet every bit the CEO who had refused to be silenced. In that moment, the bracelet glinted in harmonized light, proof that the most precious jewels are not always the most expensive, but those forged in the crucible of justice. Just days before Meridian Fine Jewelry had announced that its Dignity First framework would be shared industry-wide as an open-source service standard. Major competitors, once content to preserve the exclusivity that had long defined luxury retail, now scrambled to adopt equity audits, mandatory bias training, and transparent escalation protocols. Trade publications marveled a billion-dollar brand rewrites its own rulebook. When exclusion becomes inclusion. The Meridian model and why every luxury retailer needs dignity first. At corporate headquarters in Los Angeles, the executive suite hummed with focused energy. Diana Croft, Senior Vice President of Operations, reviewed the final rollout schedule for next quarter's equity workshops. Nationwide, 200 store managers were slated to attend in-person training sessions, led by Dr. Imani Jordan, whose approach had become synonymous with cultural transformation. The AI-powered customer feedback system, configured to flag any interaction falling short of the new service standards, had already identified and helped coach dozens of associates. Every week, the pulse of real-time analytics confirmed what the Beverly Hills data had predicted: more equitable service translated directly into customer loyalty, broader market share, and sustained revenue growth. In the midst of planning, a soft ping drew Elias back to his email. The subject line read, Invitation Harvard Business School Case Study Discussion. The Vance Protocol. Below, the message from Professor Diana Williams outlined a faculty seminar on organizational change scheduled for next month. The Morgan Library case study titled Crisis as Catalyst Meridian's Dignity. First Revolution had already been adopted by Columbia Wharton and Chicago Booth. Soon, MBA students around the world would dissect every strategic move, every courageous stand, and every policy amendment that had flowed from a moment of personal injustice. Elias leaned back, reflecting on that rainy April afternoon when the showroom lights had felt so threatening. The stakes had been personal, a father securing a gift for his daughter, and yet the outcome had been universal. It wasn't just about him or that Beverly Hills branch. It was about every person who walked through a storefront door expecting welcome and respect. Now, as his company's equity framework became the benchmark for luxury service, he saw the deeper legacy a moment of humiliation had yielded systemic transformation. That evening, in the quiet of his home office, Elias sketched out the final details of Meridian's Dignity First Council charter. This permanent advisory body comprising frontline staff, diversity experts, and community representatives would meet quarterly to vet new policies, review discrimination complaints, and ensure that the momentum toward true inclusion never slowed. It was accountability baked into the corporate DNA, a living reminder that policy change must be both reactive to incidents and proactive in prevention. Elsewhere across the campus of Stanford Law School, Ava gathered with classmates to celebrate their milestone. She brushed her fingers over the Cartier bracelet, remembering her father's calm strength in the showroom, the way he had refused to leave a place he owned until justice prevailed. She smiled, not just with pride at her own achievement, but with gratitude for the lesson he had imparted. That power paired with principle can overturn prejudice faster than any hashtag or headline. The evening's reception buzzed with lively conversation, but one exchange stood out. A budding entrepreneur introduced himself to Ava. "Your father's story inspired me," he said earnestly. "I'm opening a boutique in Detroit, and I've already integrated Dignity First guidelines into my customer service charter." He lifted his drink in a toast. "To the Vances, may every store live up to the standard you set." Ava clinked glasses with him, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she replied. He showed us that true wealth is measured in respect. Back at Meridian's flagship store, now rechristened Meridian Dignity Center, customers found more than glittering gems behind the vitrines. They found a culture. Every guest was greeted by name within seconds of entering. Every concern was escalated transparently, and every purchase concluded with heartfelt gratitude. Small plaques adorning display cases recounted the story of that fateful afternoon. Here dignity was reclaimed, justice written in real time. News vans still parked curbside occasionally, but now they filmed celebrations rather than scandals. Segments ran on morning shows from embarrassment to empowerment. How one CEO's quiet resolve sparked a retail revolution. Viewers saw footage of Rebecca Sloan's termination of Dr. Jordan's interactive training modules and of frontline associates sharing testimonials about the new service protocols. The underlying message resonated: no one should ever be treated as if they don't belong. As night fell over Los Angeles once more, Elias stood alone on his rooftop terrace, the city lights sprawling beneath him. He slipped on his favorite watch, a simple black band timepiece, and allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The flash of the Cartier bracelet on his daughter's wrist had reminded him that anything precious could also be fragile, and that the true test of leadership was safeguarding people's dignity every day, not just in crisis. Below the Meridian headquarters tower gleamed a beacon of both luxury and inclusion. And though the journey from humiliation to systemic reform had been swift, Elias knew it was just the beginning. Real change demanded vigilance, empathy, and the courage to confront bias wherever it lingered. But he had seen that even the most entrenched prejudice could be overturned in a heartbeat when dignity was non-negotiable. In the weeks that followed, store openings in Tokyo, Paris, and Dubai all adopted the Dignity First protocols from day one. Market analysts noted a correlation between inclusive service models and brand strength. Social media influencers like Sophia Reyes continued to share stories of bystander accountability, reminding the world that phones could be tools of justice as well as entertainment. And at academic conferences, the Meridian case study was hailed not only for its financial outcomes, but for its profound proof that business could and must serve a broader social purpose. Ultimately, the real legacy lay in the countless everyday interactions from the New York boutique to the Miami pop-up, where customers of every background felt truly seen. A moment of prejudice had sparked a movement. A CEO's quiet resolve had rewritten the rulebook. And as the Cartier bracelet caught the light at a Stanford graduation, it glinted not just with diamonds, but with the refracted promise of a new standard, where dignity once denied was reclaimed and codified for generations to come.